This is our Findhorn Barrel. We're here joined by Fasil Bogale, is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, it's Bogale, yes.
Bogale, yeah. Who is currently the CEO of Ekopia and is also involved in lots of other charities and organisations like Gaia Education, Growing Together, formerly one of the directors of PET, finance director of PET.
Yes.
And has also been an entrepreneur and set up various businesses like Green Bridge Organics, which created coffee, and is an accountant. And I probably haven't managed to cover everything because you seem to be involved in so much stuff.
Yes, I mean, there's a long span of things, you know, that you could do a lot in 13 years. So, but yeah, no, I think that kind of gives where I am at the moment. So it used to be a lot more, but as I got older and wiser, start condensing things to make sure everything is manageable in life. And I also have a daughter and a wife, so that's quite a very busy life as it is. So yeah.
And a dog.
And a dog.
Which I just met.
Yes, just met. Yes, it is.
And so you came up here from London. You're originally working for Euro Credit Management.
Yes.
What made you decide to completely change your lifestyle?
So I lived most of my life in London, but I always wanted more in life. So where I was working as a management accountant, and it was a very boutique company to some extent. It's about 130 people, so you could say it was a very small organisation. They managed assets. Highest point was about 20 billion, and I worked in the finance department. Worked with a lot of different aspects of the business, and I loved it. It's really great. Coming from the background I have, it was quite an achievement to be there. I had to climb a lot of ladders to get there, but it was interesting. I loved it, and it gave me a huge exposure about understanding people and life in general. That doesn't really particularly matter. Whichever bracket you're in life, everyone's stressed about life. Everyone's busy with life, and everyone to some extent is trapped in life. And I think when I was there, I did it over 5.5 years there, and I qualified as a chartered management accountant, and I didn't really want that to be my only thing that I did in my life. So I always had this thing of wanting to learn more things and see the world and be able to experience life, meaningful life, not just life itself. But I went on a sabbatical for 3 months, which was great. The company allowed that, but I was actually wanting to quit. But this is the way for them to facilitate my mini middle-age crisis. But anyway, I travelled a bit, and I went to the Himalayas, walked probably over a month. So I did Everest Base Camp, Annapurna. But before I left on my travels, I met what is now my wife. So when I came back to London, we obviously got together, and then she brought her aspect of life. And at that particular time, she lived in Findhorn before, so she always talked about it. But I wanted to venture out a bit more, so we decided to move to Hong Kong. As anyone who's been in Hong Kong, is great, but not when you're having a mini life crisis to some extent, or searching for middle life and meaning, because it's quite a hectic place. But we lived in this remote island where you can only access it by a private boat. It was one of my good friends, uni friends' fathers that had the place. So in that process, sorry, it sounds like a long story, but it was all interlinks. At that point, I was reading Eileen's books, her concept and idea of how to connect with God and all the rest of it really got me. Something profound happened, and I decided, why not? Why not come to Scotland and experience that, whatever that is in the community, which I've never experienced before. But yeah, and I came, and it was supposed to be for only Experience Week. It ended up being spiritual practice. And then from the spiritual practice, it ended up being LCG. From LCG, it ended up being, I don't know what it was, all the way to being offered a staff position or whatever. And all in all, it was nearly 2 years. So I had a brilliant time from perspective of self-growth, and really ignited who I was internally and what I was trying to aspire to achieve. I didn't really want to lose the expertise I brought into the community, if that makes sense. Most people do the opposite, which is they're trying to not talk about their past experiences, but they want to do something new. But from my perspective, it was my contribution to it. It wasn't something to run away from. So, but what it did allow me is to get into the wider community, which was actually more of an extension of it. So that allowed me to just pretty much have access to a lot of organisations, which is a really amazing thing, seeing all these amazing people doing all sorts of different things on the basis of doing something good in the world. That's how I ended up entering the wider community of Findhorn, if that makes sense, in short.
I'll just explain, because the listeners might not know what the foundation is. You were saying how you came and you did programs. So this was with the Findhorn Foundation about 10 years ago, and it was a spiritual centre of the community, which had like a number of different buildings in the park, Cluny Hill, in Forest, and there was a community centre, and you're working the community centre kitchen?
Yes, I worked in the kitchen because it was a spiritual education centre, and they had sets of programs which allows you to go inner, so that you can explore yourself and who you are and what you're bringing into this world, and then also having the space and the grounding experiences to actually be able to some extent be yourself. I called it a rehabilitation centre, so it's the easy way of doing it, because obviously we all come from our own conditions and we have lots of conditionings that we have to deal with. But it was a place where it doesn't matter which spiritual background you're in, but what it did was it gave you a place to go and find a place to look inner.
So what a lot of people would do when they would join the foundation, they'd take a job there, or they would the volunteer there, so they wouldn't have an income, and they had very little income.
No, so the whole setup was the fact that from the get-go you'd be paying for these programs, and then basically what that means is the fact that you could do your spiritual practice or any of these education programs they have inside it, but also work in their work departments. And these work departments, I think, are by far the best thing that as a program setting can ever have, because I loved working in the kitchen. And the kitchen's about feeding the whole 60, 70 people at a time, working 4 or 5 hours. And it was really the most beautiful space for me, because I loved it. It had pressure in it, but at the same time, it's such a magical space, because you got people that are not there to help you cook because you're paying them, but they're there because they want to be there, and they're doing it from a place of a spiritual practice as such. So for you to be able to manage that area space and help them to get to a point where they produce something at the end, and for the community or the people that end up benefiting from that service, you can see it in their eyes how amazing is the food that's been produced, and it's produced from a place of service. So that was it had a huge impact on me. So I just didn't really do any other departments, because the kitchen was mine. To some extent, it was my spiritual practice, if that makes sense. So, they were paying the basic things, but it wasn't something that you can make a living out of, or even, have a family or anything like that. But it's never, as far as I'm aware from me personally, and it was how it was created, it was never meant to be a permanent thing. So from my perspective, I think after 2 years, I felt my time was finished, and it wasn't from the point of view of, it was my time is finished. And I didn't mind it, because I had so many connections to the wider community already, that it was more of a progression of what could be next. And I think, as a young person-ish, I think I must have been 33, there was a lot of things that was missing as part of the bigger structure of it. So things like housing, the demand for accommodation was so high, it was pretty much unaffordable anyway, because it was very expensive. So for people like us, whether it's young or people coming into the community, it was quite difficult to find accommodations. So, and I didn't see that as a negative thing. I just saw it as a way of going, okay, there's something missing here which we could potentially work with. So I ended up joining Park Ecovillage Trust. This is a charity at that time just took on 4 affordable housing from East Wind Cluster, which is one of the first developments in the community. So they had 4 affordable housing. Very expensive to build, very challenging to build, but we had other opportunities. we thought, great, so what would it be like to build more affordable housing? And the team was great. We had other directors really passionate about affordable housing, like people like Cornelia Featherstone and Roger Dudner. I mean, there's so many different people that have been involved in these type of long-term processes. But so we started to come out with ways of collaborating with the likes of Juneland, which is a land developer in the community who had land to build affordable housing. So again, it's a very creative way. We ended up building 6 units in Westlands. Again, these type of projects are not coming from a place of donations and things, so they financially have to be viable. But we were lucky enough, the Scottish Government was very much about supporting communities, empowering them in affordable housing. They just released a new grant funding stream called Rural Housing Fund. So we tapped into that for the first time. And then that helped us, as part of it, build 6 units. But we knew there was restrictions behind that because we couldn't really afford to build 2-bedroom houses, so we ended up building 1-bedroom flats. Again, it's an achievement from our perspective because we're just adding from the 4 that started there. So, but then we got more creative, and then ended up building Woodside. I don't know if you've been to Woodside.
Is that the one north of Eastwinds?
Yes.
Yeah. And
that one, again, because we were getting good at it, Rural Housing Fund, the Scottish Government gave us over £500,000 of grants to build those. So we got creative to add 4 2-bedrooms and then 1 1-bedrooms, and then that way the generational mixture gets better. So that means we take families, single people, elders, and all that. Pushing that forward to now, Ekopia's just literally have done 6 of more affordable housing, but this time for sale. That's a mixture between 1 and 2 bedrooms. So we were lucky again with Scottish Government. In total, we aimed for 25 at the beginning, about 10 years ago, and then now we've got 32 units of affordable housing. So again, it's just about creating and adding something to what was already done before. So that's pet experience. But they take years, and I loved being in pet for that long, but these one cluster takes 4 years to build. As you can understand, there's a lot of money involved in it. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of grants. There's a lot of obligations. There's a lot of legal structures. So it was fun to do, and quite happy to be part of that. And I think, I'd say that was the affordable housing experience.
So is that mainly what you've been involved in, the housing sort of?
No. So in PET, I was a volunteer, so I wasn't paid for that. But again, it came from a place of we need to do a bit more of these. As you know, the fact that the community has expanded a lot, people are coming up with more ideas to build more. But
there's no space left, unless you build. I mean, you can't build further into the dunes. Is that right?
I think the next is Pine Ridge, and by the entrance. I think that was one of the suggestions that people are making. But affordable housing are a key thing to so that we don't really default back to having one of those, a well thought area where people think it's a great idea to go and use it as an investment or use it as a retirement or whatever, but actually what you need to do is actually have an active environment. And for that, one of the criteria is very much about affordable housing.
Because I think we learned the lesson from the Field of Dreams, which was that it was, people built large houses and, to have maybe 1 or 2 people in this huge house, and it could be used much more efficiently. I think the new developments in East Winds and West Winds use the space much more effectively.
Yeah, they're much smaller and footprints, definitely. Field of Dreams, yes, you're right, they're quite big mansion houses for 1 or 2 people. As a young people coming through, then you go, what's the next thing that you need to stick around? It's jobs, right? So, and that aspect of it, which is very much about how do you build a sustainable economy in the community like ours. And I was also at that time volunteering for Ekopia, which is a community benefit society. So that's been going around for, I think, 23 years.
Can you define what community benefit society means?
Technically, it's a non-for-profit, and it's very much about all these activities that needs to happen. It has to show there's a benefit to the community, so that you're not using it as a way of an investment vehicle or anything like that. So Ekopia, when it started just over 23 years ago, it was what you'd call, it was actually the first community buyout. So everything in our community organisation get created for a purpose and a reason of something that needs to happen at a particular time. 23 years ago, the foundation and their subsidiary NFD, they wanted to sell the Phoenix to David Hoyle. Don't know if you know David Hoyle. He ended up creating the big house, which is in the village. At that particular time, the asking price it was slightly higher than what most of these people can afford. So David Hoyle and others, and I don't know if there's Alec Walker's involved in that, but they came up with a great idea. They said they discovered there's a vehicle to which allows you and allows the community to raise finances in order to invest in things like buying a shop, for example. This is 23 years ago. So it wasn't a really well-known instrument or entities at that particular time, at least not in the north of Scotland. So they came out with a great idea, creating and the benefit to society is actually is a name that's recently they changed it to that. I think it used to be called Providence or something. But anyway, so they needed to raise some money, and what community benefit societies do is actually they're able to raise what is called a community share issues. In other words, you can buy shares for a particular project and become a member and a shareholder, to which you are obviously, it gets invested to a project like buying the Phoenix. So they were really successfully, first time the community raised the finances as an investment form to buy what is known as the Phoenix Cafe and Shop.
And that's the business, not the actual building itself. Just want to clarify that.
So we don't. So the business doesn't own the buildings because it was renting that out from the foundation, and now it's owned by another entity that's recently bought it. So they realised what a great way to do it. What a great way to raise money instead of having to go and raise the money elsewhere through banks and stuff like that, where obviously the money never stays local. But this is the best way and a mechanism to allow communities to empower themselves, to invest in their own assets and facilities and businesses, and also retain the interest payments within the community. And they decided, wow, what a great instrument. So every time the community needed to develop stuff like buy the wind turbines, so instead of going to a banks, they went Ekopia was used to raise the money. So again, community members investing in community projects and retaining everything within the economy, and then they expanded from that. So when I joined about 10 years ago, Ekopia had about £900,000 in under management. The 900 was in affordable housing. They had a bit of the social enterprise hub, which is the Trees for Life building. But then we got creative when I came in. Again, a volunteer, but we didn't. You make do with what you've got. But we got paid. We got really good grants to come through to pay some of our salaries. So we ended up creating the Hive. The Hive is a social enterprise hub. It's 2 buildings. At the moment, it holds about 8-9 organisations in there, and give them the space. The reason behind that is, before that, everyone worked from home. But there's a huge impact to that. Our interactions limited. Creating a space like that was actually quite an achievement from our perspective, to get people into one space and give them an actual building that's ecological, and they can interact with each other, which is fantastic, And we got that through. We were very creative with that. You couldn't really haven't done it again if we didn't get grants, because anything you seem to be doing that's good, you need assistance. And we were very good at raising money through the investments as well as getting grants. There's lots of different grant funders stepped in to help us with that. But then again, there's other things we've been doing. So we ended up bailing out Drumdoon School. When Drumdoon School went into crisis because they had this huge amount of debts, we had to step in very creatively to buy the building, so they can use that money to pay off all the debts, so that they can pretty much start again new. But we ended up owning it, and after 5 years, recently, just February time, they bought back the building, which is really great because we did our duty on that perspective. We also did the same thing for Mori Art Centre. They were getting into a lot of financial difficulties, and to help them and actually to protect the building to remain in the community, we ended up buying the building, and now they rent that space off us. And it's such another great way of flexibility of keeping community structures and facilities, as long as they're financially managed well, that they can remain in the community for a long time. So, I mean, there's so many different things we've been doing in Ekopia. But yeah, we keep trying to maintain the energy of how do we bring in more stable economy in Findhorn and around it. We also help natural useful. Can't even say that name. You know, the natural useful. Again, it's another ability. They wanted to buy the land off whoever the owner was, and then we were willing to help them with that for lending them the money. So Ekopia is just such a great mechanism to allow a lot of community members to invest in it. We've got about £2 million of investment in various projects, and it's a great way, cheap way to finance things locally. Then you're not really pegged or linked to the market. Like at the moment, the base rate is 5 point something, so that means anything you borrow is likely to be over 8-9%. But all of everything that we lent out with is affordable housing. They're still benefiting from 5%, and it hasn't changed whether the base rate went up or down. At the back of it, the investors get what they said yes in the form of interest, and we keep our administration really low and very effective and efficient. So, you know, everybody's happy, and I think, yeah, it's one of my favourite organisations that I work for.
And you're currently looking to buy the golf course at Kinloss?
Yes, yeah. So for the past 7 years, I mean, there's been so many different reports and research that we've done locally, but we've been looking at as one of our, you know, it's one of the cool things we do is about food resilience, and we've been looking at how we can help. As you know, obviously we're not farmers, but you know, how can we reduce the barriers for food resilience is going to become the key thing in the next few years, whether we like it or not. The next 10 years, it'll be a big issue, considering especially in the UK where most of our food comes from abroad. But we've been looking at how do we help with that, and most of the farms that always come for sale, we couldn't really financially make it work because they're very expensive and they tend to be over 100 acres of land, and but we've been looking at different lands as potentials, and we were just driving past the Kinloss golf course, and we thought, oh my God, this is what a great place to attempt that, because it's a small place. The land is only about 50 acres. Whether that will become successful or even we'll be in a position to buy it is another big question. But we're currently talking to the owner. With the type of project that comes to food growing, there's not a huge amount of money you can earn out of it, so you need to make sure the business model works, and especially how you buy the land is the key element to it. We're kind of looking at a model of community supported agriculture. I don't know if you know anything about it. So basically, because the food system is a broken system, right? This is the way I kind of interpret it in the best way I can explain it. The food system is broken. So from a point of view of I can grow any organic products, it's very, very unlikely the fact that people will appreciate the price tag that you're going to put on it, because they obviously get it elsewhere for cheaper. You can go to the supermarket, they dominate everything in our life anyway. It's not just a separate thing. So that means you already have a broken system, and to expect the growers to be an entrepreneur, to have the passion for growing, to have the passion for marketing, to have the passion for all sorts of things to make this financially viable, what we're saying is actually, you know, it's not an uncommon model, by the way. It's the first one was used, Earthshare. It did the same thing, but the principle is actually is don't expect the growers. It's not the growers' responsibility to make this viable or to create us the food resilience. because the system is broke. So therefore what we need to do is actually go, okay, how do we as individuals help the grower who's passionate about growing food, hire them in a way of they can work on the land, but know the fact that we will always pay monthly as members to make it work, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So I'm not
so it's like a sort of cooperative type.
It's a similar cooperative, but actually what it is that the members are, it's the members' responsibility to make it financially sustainable. So in other words, it's creating an entity that will end up being, the community supported agriculture. They'll run the scheme themselves. They will hire the grower. The grower will create the food, obviously, and then distribute the vegetables and the fruits to its members. And what it does is it guarantees the income coming through, because you got to pay as membership every month whether they produce food or not. And in that way you've kind of created a very resilient system where it is us paying for people to grow our food for us, and then therefore actually have a sense of ownership around it. Because if you don't bring ownership about it, then our default will always be to go back to the supermarket and get it cheaper. What do I need to do? But one element that we're probably going to try to reduce is the level of expectation, the fact that as a member you have to volunteer. You don't have to, but that's kind of like the model that we need to tweak around it. But in an ideal way, that will be an ideal thing to create. Then you have, an empowered, which you're going to have to put a lot of education elements to it, because people need to understand why we're doing this and why they need to be part of it, and then therefore their kids can be part of it, and then therefore the next generations is also there as part of the whole process, so that you're making it as a way of life. Ultimately, it's not an exchange of service, and that's the ideal thing that we have at the moment. Or if we find a really amazing growers up there who are hugely going to be motivated, and they want to do the A's and the B's and the marketing and the thing, and they want to create the entrepreneur, and they want to create the business they all want, and then all of a sudden they've been searching for this place, and and all of a sudden they think our place is great, fantastic. But in reality of it, I think it's better if it's held collectively than by individual growers, and I think that's the way that we would kind of aspire to at least give it a direction to go. But our responsibility is to hold the land, to purchase the land and own the land, so that how we can own it, hold it, and whatever happens, whatever experiment that happens on it, that land will always be there for food growing, and that's the energy that we want to hold, so that it's not a hugely commercialized idea behind it. Actually, we want to keep it going. It might not work for the first generation, but it might work for the second and the third and the fourth. It's about just having and securing the land, so that we have that. In the community, we don't have that. We don't have a food growing space that's dedicated to it, and you don't have ownership issues or anything like that. We don't have that. But we are supposed to be an eco-village as well. So an eco-village is food resilience is key. So
in a way, the Cullen Gardens was sort of that, but it was within the foundation. So It was tied up into the idea of being part of a spiritual centre. But now that's kind of changed so much. You're looking to try and do that. Ideally, it would be kind of closer to the eco-village, but it's pretty close.
It's pretty close. Yeah. But then I think, it's like most things. Is we're part of a bioregion, We're part of a region. We have a really high aging population, but the wider communities and the region you're living in, the age variation is like the opposite. So, but when you talk about food resilience, it's not just about feeding each other, but it's actually feeding your neighbours. So, and it's not, it's not an issue just for Findhorn, but it's an issue for the whole nation. So, but why not make it part of the region? And I think tapping into that resources of people, resources, and as well as all the other bits that we need to tap in, it's the key. When you get up here, we've always worked on the basis of that. So that's why most of the projects that we got funded for and all the rest of it's always coming from external. Because we're always trying to network out and be part of the wider community you were living in, and in that way you've got the wider support. But in farm food growing, because you're going to need quite a significant amount of people, I think is a great thing for places like forests or all these other areas that are expanding significantly because of all the new houses coming through. But I think it's about reaching out as well as. But we are part of that connections of the Findhorn community and all the rest of it.
In a way, Ekopia acts a little bit like the council, but for the community. It's not obviously not like compulsory taxation, but people contribute money to things that not just to make money, but to actually make things happen for the benefit of everyone, which is kind of what the council does.
But we're slightly a bit different from the council per se, but it's more of like, think of it like an ethical investment. People don't just want to put their money into something, but they also want to know that the pension, most of them is their pension, so it's secured. At least it has some element of interest, at least to counterbalance the inflations that we've got at the moment, and is going towards a project they love. I mean, what a great combination, And I think the more and more people do that and have a vehicle like Ekopia, it becomes a very powerful tool, and it speeds things up to some extent, because if you're trying to get funding externally, trying to get things financed, most projects, being community projects, they're dead from the beginning because you can't afford the finances. So from our perspective, it's about how to help the core of the economy and how it works. So, and within that is about having streams of activities that are generating something in a form of income. And therefore the fact that they have the ability to sustain themselves. And our really ultimate theme inside is sustainability. Financial sustainability, which creates stability within the organisation, which means it allows you to do more activity to which you were created for. And then if you can try to find a balance between that, I think once you find the balance there, then it works, And then you have a thriving community. But we're still we're only 23 years old. But in the sense of our work, we're just about getting started, I think is the word. And it's a great place to be. And I think Findhorn is great for this type of stuff, because for our postcode, we have such a highest entrepreneurs, because we're north of Scotland. Therefore, you being able to get a job that you like or the income you're going to need, it's not going to be there. So people are creative from the get-go. It doesn't matter which age you're in. And that creativity it gets filled with so many different things. And I think that's what we're very good at the moment. And we have such a huge impact to the local economy as well. And the fact that the foundation stopped trading, and the number of people coming through that has reduced a lot, and it impacts the community. The wider community is impacted. We just don't see it. But then again, that shows you our ability to keep doing what we need to do. Maybe might not be international, but maybe the next focus is local. And what do we have around to help us do that? I think it's the ultimate question. Does that make sense?
I think that's probably a good time to stop there.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the time to have a conversation with me on the podcast.
No, it's great. It's great to have a chat. Hardly ever get a chance. So, but yeah, do check us out. Our websites, and it's a lot. The website is a lot better to explain things than a chat. But yeah, like I said, it's a great time to be around. There's so much to be done. So it's a different generation. So we have to keep working for the next generation, and hope for the best.